It's time for the 10 best comic books of 2021. Comic books are the best storytelling medium in the entire world. And the very best comic book issues leave the reader feeling something, whether it's hope, loss, love, sadness. It leaves an impression on you. You sit there and you look at that comic book that you just read, knowing that you've experienced something that was important to you, knowing that you and this character, or perhaps even the creator, have a bond between you that you didn't have before you read that comic book. I have some great ones here that we're going to talk about. A lot of these feature high octane action, but almost every one of them also features an expression of the character, an elevation of the reader's appreciation of the mission of the protagonist, what they've gone through, what they're willing to go through. Not every comic book writer is skilled enough to execute a comic book at the highest levels possible. But we have 10 of the very best comic issues of 2021 I want to talk with you today. We're going to start out with DC Comics on Black Label, Batman the Imposter. I'm not always the biggest fan of these more dire, grittier takes on Batman. He's already a gritty enough character to begin with, in my opinion. But what Batman the Imposter really does, and so many writers have been trying to execute this really since The Dark Knight Returns, is to express what Bruce Wayne is willing to do to fight for justice in Gotham. What is he willing to sacrifice? What is he willing to lose? What will it take for Bruce Wayne Batman to stop fighting? He will never stop fighting. You can take his father figure, you can take his best friend, and he will continue his mission. Bruce Wayne has an unquenchable thirst for justice and vengeance for what happened to him in Crime Alley. Batman the Imposter from Mattson Tomlin and Andrea Sorrentino is absolutely brilliant in its execution. And while the story does take Batman to a bit of a darker place than I personally would have liked, it still leaves you with a greater understanding of Bruce Wayne. Comic writer Michael Morricone is one of my personal favorites in the comic book industry. He doesn't know how to get enough acclaim, and he certainly hasn't got enough opportunities at DC and Marvel. But I think people are starting to understand just what a quality comic book writer he is with his Barbaric series that came out this year. While I may not be personally invested in this character like I am a Superman or a Captain America, Morricone does a great job getting the reader not only to buy into the character, this main protagonist, this barbarian, but also his wisecracking, blood-drinking acts that's always getting him in on these weird adventures. This is the funniest comic series I read all year. The fact that Morricone was able to take a static object like an axe and bring it to life and give it personality really speaks to the quality of the writer. Each and every time I read an issue of Barbaric in 2021, all I could think about was when was the next issue coming out. Daredevil, Matt Murdock, is one of my personal favorite characters. He's literally had a murderer's row of comic writers over the past few decades. So it's actually a pretty daunting task to come onto a Daredevil series and do something that's actually memorable. And I think Chip Zdarsky has absolutely done that with his Daredevil run. And in 2021, the standout issue, in my opinion, is Daredevil 27. This is part of the King in Black tie-in. In this issue, he's essentially been taken over by a symbiote. And as a reader, I interpret this as him being taken over by a demon, which certainly plays into one of the key elements of Daredevil, religion, his Catholic faith, and the fact that he was able to exorcise his own demon really connected with me. And I was overwhelmingly impressed with how Zdarsky was able to end up marrying this weird King in Black null story in with these key components of Daredevil to make a fantastic standout issue, which in my opinion was probably the best issue, not only of Daredevil, but the King in Black event as well. Berserker was a force of nature in 2021. We know the numbers from the crowdfunding. We know it's the best-selling comic book in the last 8 years. Over 600,000 copies of issue number 1 were shipped to comic stores. Obviously driven in no small part being associated with Keanu Reeves, but Keanu Reeves and the team at Boom Studios put a fantastic creative duo on this, Matt Kent and Ron Garney. And when you read issue 1 and you see the beautiful brutality, it adds legitimacy to the story. It adds a visceral feel to the character. And you want to know, why is he doing this? How did he get here? What would drive B to be this savage? And how has he been able to live with the fact that he has been a killing machine essentially from the beginning of time? And there's a reason that Berserker continues to move high numbers. It's not just Keanu Reeves. It's because the creators they put on this were able to impart something onto the character, leaving the readers wanting No, needing to know more about B and his story, and if he can finally break the curse of immortality. Nick Spencer absolutely redeemed himself after the Secret Empire fiasco with Hydra Cap. His run on Amazing Spider-Man is perhaps the best of the last decade. And he had been hinting all along that eventually he was going to retcon away one of the most hated storylines of all times, One More Day. Well, that didn't quite happen, but in Amazing Spider-Man 73, he certainly retconned another story that had been haunting Spider-Man fans for decades, Sins Past. Some readers took years to come back and trust Marvel with Spider-Man again. Some readers never came back after Sins Past. And Nick Spencer did a fantastic job wiping away the sins of Marvel's past, and even in death is able to redeem Gwen Stacy's legacy by acknowledging that Gwen Stacy was always too classy for Norman Osborn. This story never made sense from the day it was published. It stunk to high heavens for years, and it's finally been brushed away. Thank you, Nick Spencer. You left Amazing Spider-Man on the highest of notes. You gave the fans something they wanted. You gave them hope that Marvel Comics will listen to their fans. And if they made a poor decision, they are willing to undo it and make things right and stop destroying their characters in the name of shock value. We Live from the Miranda Brothers is one of the most emotionally charged roller coaster rides I've ever been on while reading a comic book. I had the highest of highs and the lowest of lows. The Miranda Brothers play with your emotions, hit you in the feel spots as you're going through this journey with Hototo and Tala as they're trying to save young Hototo's life. Tala knows that she has no hope. She didn't receive one of the devices that is going to save her before this world-ending event happens. But she never leaves her little brother's side. She never tries to take it from him. She knows it's her job to get her little brother to the finish line and saved and off of this earth no matter what. And issue number 5, the finale of We Live, delivers everything the reader had hoped for. It's not often that comic book creators take you on an emotional journey, and in the end, they're skilled enough to actually pay it off in the manner which the story absolutely demands. And the finale is a blueprint, a lesson to other comic book creators on how to leave the comic audience satisfied and still wanting more. Raphael is one of my favorite fictional heroes of all time, whether it be in the cartoon where I first met him, whether it be in movies, video games, or comic books. There's something that I am just drawn to when it comes to Raphael. So in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Last Ronin #2, and we finally learn the fate of Raphael. This is one of the most emotionally charged issues I've ever read in my life. I remember when we finally get to the reveal that Raphael and his hot-headedness, which was always a double-edged sword for the character, led him into essentially a no-win situation. And he was still Raphael to the end. He never backed out. He was still willing to lay it all on the line. He was still willing to sacrifice for his brothers, for his family. I'm not going to lie to you and say that this comic book left me feeling hopeful or energetic. I certainly felt a deep amount of sadness seeing what happens to Raphael here, his final fate. But the ending for your favorite heroes can't always be happy. And Raphael was always destined to have a tragic ending. And I can't imagine anyone pulling it off any better than Tom Waltz, Kevin Eastman, and the team behind Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, The Last Ronin. Dick Grayson is one of my favorite superheroes in all comics. In my opinion, I think he's the most relatable superhero out there. I love the juxtaposition of Dick Grayson's view of his mission versus Bruce Wayne's view of his mission. Even though they have some similar character traits, training, and backstory, Dick Grayson is so much more optimistic. He's so much more hopeful, and he's so much more down to earth and relatable. And I think that's one of the reasons that he really stands out. Robin and Batman #2 is such a wonderful reading experience. A Batman and Robin story told strictly from the perspective of a very young, very immature, very naive Dick Grayson as the understudy of Batman. But the highlight is absolutely seeing Dick Grayson meet the Teen Titans for the very first time. I understand it doesn't work in continuity if you think about the timeline of things, but it's so much fun. And every once in a while, you have to let your guard down as a reader and realize not every one of these creators are going out of their way to ruin the things that you love. And only then can you really appreciate just how wonderful a story like this is. Seeing the Teen Titans essentially going on their very first missions together, going out and getting into mischief and making it back in time not to get caught. And then the big final reveal that was all part of Batman's plan all along. It's just a fantastic story. It's a great narrative. Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen knocked it out of the park with Robin and Batman #2. If this comic book does not leave you smiling, I don't know what to tell. Jonathan Hickman's House of X Powers of 10 was one of the most exciting reboots of a major comic book franchise of the last 10, 15, 20 years. Unfortunately, things have not played out the way I think a lot of X-Men fans would have liked them to. There were so many things that I wanted to see pay off, and Jonathan Hickman, we know that he's left X-Men, but he didn't really do it. That's why X-Men 20 really stands out. It is the what might have been story. This is literally what I thought I was going to be receiving when House of X Powers of 10 was over. This is a fantastic story and a very interesting character exploration for Mystique, a character I'm not personally all that emotionally or personally invested in, but to see the lengths that she will go to reunite with her wife, Destiny, and the disgusting behavior of Charles and Magneto, and the way that they're using her because they know she's willing to do anything to bring her wife back. And we finally got to see the real reveal of Nimrod, and then the loss of Dr. Gregor within that. For one day, fans of House of X and Powers of 10 got to see what might have been the X-Men story Jonathan Hickman was trying to tell all along. It's unfortunate we'll never get all of it. Reading a comic book like X-Men 20 really left me with so many conflicting emotions. I love the story. It's exactly what I wanted. But it's so sad that we're never, ever going to see this completed out to its fullest. There are so many comic book writers that do not get Clark Kent's Superman. They think he's Superman and that he's a superhero because he has superpowers. I've always maintained that my personal favorite Superman story is Up, Up, and Away because it explains that the reason Clark Kent is a superhero is because of his principles, because of his morals given to him essentially by his parents. And the fact that he has superpowers means that he can take those and do the right thing essentially at all times. And that's why he's an aspirational hero. So many people want to tear Superman down. Obviously, we talked about Superman twice in the worst comics of the year list. Daniel Warren Johnson absolutely gets that the reason that Clark Kent's Superman is a hero is because of the foundation and the love that he received from his mother and father. And his generation story in the Superman Red and Blue #5 anthology comic is the best example I've seen of this in years. This is not an action-packed comic book, but it is an emotionally charged comic book. When you see the fears and the frustrations and the hesitation of Pa Kent, is he going to be a good dad? He wants to be a good dad, but he doesn't know if he can. I'm 43 years old. I'm a father myself. A lot of people probably think I've got everything figured out, but I have so many insecurities and moments where I wonder, am I going to be a good dad? Am I being a good dad? But when I see a story like this, I completely relate to it. And you can see why Clark Kent ends up being the greatest superhero in the history of comic books. It's because of the love of a father who was always there for him and let him know that no matter what, that he would love him in the end. When you walk away from Superman Red and Blue #5, the generation story, you walk away with a deeper connection to Clark Kent. You walk away with a deeper connection to Superman. You walk away with an appreciation for Pa Kent and Ma Kent and the role that they played in creating this magnificent, aspirational hero that all kids around the world can look up to, who stands for truth, justice, and the American way. It's unfortunate we don't have more creators like Daniel Warren Johnson that go out and try to build up on the lore or highlight the lore or even let you know how they feel about the character. Because after reading this, I know that Daniel Warren Johnson loves Superman. After reading Beta Ray Bill, I know that Daniel Warren Johnson loves Beta Ray Bill. And as a reader, I know that I can trust Daniel Warren Johnson pretty much with any character that they give him with at DC, Marvel, or any publisher. Earlier today, I did have another top 10 list, but it was the opposite spectrum, the top 10 worst comics of 2021. If you're feeling so high right now, maybe you want to check out some of the things that didn't work out and some of the comic books that did not work out nearly as well as these did.